So what are Auto-GPTs, Daniel?
So first of all, they've only been around for a very short while. But if you look at the technology that sits behind ChatGPT, you've got these kind of conversational bots, and you've got these things that can do natural language processing. They can write text and so on. So the idea of this is you take these, you generally use the API, the programming side of it, to access this, but you use it iteratively. And what I mean by that is you go in and say, what's the problem you want to solve? So I want to solve this particular problem. And then I go through and say, what's the starting point? Well, the starting point is create a task list. So if I want to go through and I want to solve world hunger, or I want to go through and find out solutions to the climate crisis, or whatever it might be, these are big examples, okay? But the point being is you go through and it will create a list, first of all. And that list is like, do the research, work out what's going on already, look at what the potential solutions are at the moment. What are the cutting edge solutions? How could we implement them? And it will build a list, and then it iterates. And it goes, right, task one, let's try and answer that. And as it answers that, it will come up with other tasks, and they'll go onto the task list. And you set the iterations, and it will start cycling through and doing the research, coming up with ideas, coming up with solutions, and kind of building this out as well. Now, at the moment, these, if you ask it to build a marketing strategy, for example, it's quite generic. It doesn't answer specifically. But once I could also get this to look at my web analytics, and maybe I could get this to look at other data and then do it in a very specific use case, then this becomes really, really powerful.
So are there any good examples that we can have a look at?
Yeah, a lot of this is accessed via the API, but actually, and we'll put this into the comments underneath as well, and it will be on the website, targetinternet.com/resources as well. But you've got Baby AGI, Auto-GPT, Agent GPT is the one worth looking at, because you can do that yourself. You can actually interface without the API, and you'll kind of see the power of it. Now, you're limited the amount of iterations you can do, but it's quite a kind of, it's a leap forwards as well. And you were talking about these earlier.
I mean, some of the more powerful ones, like you have to install Python and you run it locally on your machine. But I think what's interesting is you can connect them up to all sorts of services.
Yeah.
Like you could give this thing access to your credit card, and it could make purchasing decisions on your behalf.
Right.
And it won't just do one set of tasks. It will then go on and, like, there've been instances I was looking at on Twitter where somebody's created one of these agents, and actually the agent, in order to solve the task it was given, was creating sub-agents to go off and do other tasks. And this is a whole new level of kind of machine consciousness in a way, because it's actually, it's not limited. Things like ChatGPT have always had quite big limitations on remembering previous conversations, and like things that we used to, like Alexa and Google Assistant, like they're rubbish at that. Like, can't remember the last thing you ask it tends to chunk it up. Whereas with these entities, actually, they are more like an agent. It's kind of reminiscent of kind of the 80s hit TV show Knight Rider. We had Kit the car, this kind of thinking entity that could supplement the hero's tasks and like help him out with stuff. It's kind of like that. It's kind of like a little personal assistant that can actually go off and do things. But the remarkable thing is these things are going off and people are just sitting back and getting the results. Now, at the moment, the results, although very impressive and way beyond anything we've seen before, have their limitations. Like I said, it's a little bit lackluster. But very often, remember, the examples you've been given, it just programmers and developers are just messing around with it for an hour, and it's getting something that's reasonably good and quite very complex in terms of its logic. I think some of the more impressive examples are where these things are not only programming, but then going through and auditing their code and fixing issues, and coming up with little subroutines and ways around it. Like, when a machine can do that, that's incredibly powerful.
My favorite example of this was one that was going off and doing a particular problem. As doing it had to read a CAPTCHA. So one of those things that are designed so computers can't read them. So it couldn't read it. So it put a job onto Fiverr to recruit a human being to read the CAPTCHA for them.
Wow.
To actually therefore go through and be able to solve the problem. So there's some quite extreme examples, but it's worth taking a look at just to get your head around this iteration loop of creating task lists, working through them, creating more tasks. And then when you start integrating with other systems, this becomes really interesting.
Just as another example, there's an example here where someone put on Twitter and they said, Auto-GPT was trying to create an app for me, recognized I didn't have Node, Googled how to install Node, found a Stack Overflow article with a link, downloaded it, extracted it, and then spawned the server for me.
Yeah, so it can learn from downloading things, and it's amazing. So
it was an agent that learned Hindi.
Yeah,
like it learned a language. Like, it went out and like worked out and actually was able to write that. That's amazing.
It is amazing. So I think take a look at these, understand what's going on behind them, and then start thinking about how you could use these to kind of innovate within your organization. And that's where the opportunity lies.